Good day. It's the Lone Vol, and this is Volpod Episode 2, coming at you on the terrible weekend of September 11th. I mean, September 11th is not a funny thing. Don't get me wrong, I'm not laughing about that, but I will say that it's odd how time sort of allows jokes to proceed. So if I wanted to make a 9/11 joke, I don't think it would be too out of bounds, but, 20 years ago, it's like, oh, God, why would you ever do that? I was watching a UFC event over the weekend. Very strange from the UFC. I mean, they have a really big presence in the UK, a lot of UK fighters on the card. And I guess if you want to talk about, the UK influence, I'm sure there are Canadian fighters, Australian fighters. It was a pretty big empire at one point, right? But they had a moment of silence for the Queen. And, like, the Las Vegas crowd was having none of it. Like, they start booing and then start chanting USA. So, pretty dope. But also over the weekend, there was a football game. Tennessee played Pitt at Pitt. Yeah, not a great Tennessee performance, I thought. Although I will say it's fantastic to play like shit and still win. And I really like the physicality out of our guys. I think that's one thing that's sort of overblown. If a team has to come and play us, by now they've expected, hey, these guys are going to go incredibly fast. So we got to be prepared. We got to be disciplined. Make sure we cover all our assignments and things like that. But I think where teams sort of are caught off guard is the fact that, predominantly, now this game, not so much, but predominantly we are a run-first team. And running the ball, I always say, is pretty much a prerequisite for being a physical football team. So we're pretty run-heavy. To me, that's something that's going to be interesting to look at moving forward, is just how run-heavy we'll become. But, I mean, the fact is, if we're a run-heavy football team, chances are we're going to be physical, no matter how many points we put up. A lot of that just has to do with the fact that the pace, we're putting up a lot of points because we have a pretty good pace, an incredible pace. So that shouldn't be lost on anybody. But, one of the things I was worried about coming into this season was, okay, they have some film, they know what to expect out of this. We're not really going to catch a team off guard, but I think a common thread is that we will catch people off guard quite a bit because we're a lot more physical than with the common trope of, flashy offense. It's like, no, we'll still actually hit you in the mouth. So, but yeah, thought we played pretty bad. Plenty of opportunities to put the game out of reach for Pitt, and we just continued to shoot ourselves in the foot. Had a disastrous third quarter, but the defense stepped up. They looked like they saw what was in front of them. Like, oh, this team doesn't have their starting quarterback and their starting running backs broken. A lot of good quarterback pressures. It was really nice to see a couple, not a lot, but a couple of exotic sort of blitz packages. Trayvon Flowers getting in there at a key moment of the game was fantastic. But yeah, let's dig into it. So offense, the game plan to me was a little strange. Don't really know what to make of it just yet. I mean, it was obvious to me that we were going towards throwing very early and often. I think the staff saw that Pittsburgh had a really big matchup disadvantage because our receivers in Brew McCoy, Jalen Hyatt, and Cedric Tillman probably average about 6'2", and I think their corners probably average 5'3". I don't know that for a fact, but they were definitely smaller, and I think that's probably why you didn't see a lot of rotation from the wide receivers. There were plenty of people on the field, but it seemed like Hooker had, okay, this drive is going to be a Brew McCoy drive. This drive's going to be a Jalen Hyatt drive. This drive's going to be a Cedric Tillman drive, so forth and so on. So, yeah, really pass heavy, which is not really the identity that this team is sort of known for. Again, it's sort of a run-first team. Running will eventually set up these enormous big pass plays. And, I mean, the fact was, though, is the pass plays were there. for the most part. When I mean the most part, I do mean like 85% of the time we had guys running open, running free. It was really on the line to try and get enough pressure on Hooker, which I don't think they did at all. I mean, there were a couple of occasions where things just sort of broke down, but for the most part, I thought the personnel that we had, really separated themselves. And I think that would be applicable throughout the season. Like, the receivers are probably the best core group of guys on the field, I want to say. Especially Brew McCoy. I mean, Cedric Tillman's going to get his pub or whatever, and I think he's probably advanced from even what he was last year. He had a couple of key drops, which we'll sort of talk about in a minute, but he also made some really dynamic plays. And Brew McCoy, like, geez Louise, this guy, he makes so many small adjustments to the ball. That's something that is, you could say it's difficult to be taught, but in reality it's almost impossible to teach. This idea of adjustments, not just to the ball in the air, but to what the quarterback's going to do, what the quarterback's been doing. And he had a play on third down that may have won the game for Tennessee, where I think it was like a 3rd and 8, and he's along the sideline. So he manages to stay in bounds after the catch and just put a really sneaky move on the corner to get the first down, extend the drive. These sorts of things sort of go unheralded, but it's really hard to convert a 3rd and 9, and especially when the ball was only thrown for like 5 yards or something like that. So the guys that we're playing today, really big bodies. So it'll be interesting to see how this receiving core sort of develops. How they sort of add the Walker Merrills, how they add the Squirrel Whites, so forth and so on, who could throw interesting wrinkles into an already pretty dynamic offense. What gets me though is like I said, we're primarily a running team. So how much of this is just we can't run the ball very well versus it was just a favorable matchup? Because I mean, I think Hooker threw 42 times. There were only 2 games last year where Hendon Hooker threw greater than 40 times. One was against Georgia in a game that was just going nowhere, and then against Purdue in a very close game. I don't have to tell you this, but I mean, the more and more you run, the greater chance of your success. And even still, even on 42 passing attempts, I think Hooker was still throwing for over 60%, something like 64%. Not the greatest, but still, good enough. But it does worry me because the running backs are abysmal in this offense. So Jalen Wright, not bad. I think he has like a, even going into this game, he had a 5-yard per carry offense. But when you fumble the ball, I think it's like a universal rule amongst coaches that you'll never see the ball again. At some point, it's strange. It's like if you're in a plane crash, a very rare circumstance, what are the odds that you'll get in another plane crash? Now, you could say, hey, well, if I never get on a plane again, there's a 100% chance I'll never get in a plane crash. And this is true. But we don't control those outcomes, right? So the guys that fumble, it almost is like you're putting too much on it. It's just like, okay, you fumbled, but you know what? You're actually our best runner. Okay. So, I hate that for you, but just go ahead and we'll take the hit, but we understand if you fumble, it's okay. Like, we're not going to make a huge deal about it. If you're fumbling 3-4 times in a game, okay, I got it. You need to just leave the game and then work on, whatever it is you need to work on, whether you do that stupid thing where you carry the ball around campus or whatever it is. So, Jalen Wright, okay, I think he's serviceable. Jabari Small is not great. And I remember as a freshman, I thought he was really explosive. He has taken a dramatic hit from that explosivity. I see for him going forward a very niche role in picking up short yards. He is pretty much automatic, I think, from 1 yard out, 2 yards out. If you desperately need to get a first down, he can extend the drive for that. But outside of that, not fantastic. And Hendon Hooker, I thought, Didn't run the ball great. To me, he's never been a great runner of the football. He's been very good at picking up yards on the feet, when necessary. And, he's really hard to bring down, but he's not really a big body. His vision in terms of he likes to do the spin move where all the defenders are, like towards the inside. You're just not going to get yards that way, on a consistent basis. But I mean, the real problem on offense were just the mistakes, early and often, just tons of mistakes. If you look at the first two drives on offense, both were 3 and outs. On the first drive, Hooker throws a little swing pass to Small. Small immediately takes the wrong angle, choosing to bounce it outside instead of planting his foot and cutting it in, where a blocker is coming down the field to help him out. So he turns what could have been maybe a 6-7 yard gain, and now you're looking at 2nd and 3 compared to, okay, now it's 2nd and 10, 2nd and 9, right? Second play in that drive, a drop from Tillman. Then the third play is an overthrow from Hendon Hooker, and then we punt. Second drive, overthrow. Second play, sort of like this little play action. It looked kind of broken. I think Hyatt maybe ran the wrong route, or maybe Hendon, or it wasn't the correct play. The line didn't really pop straight up, so it didn't look like a passing play so much. They didn't really pull anybody and pop straight up either, so it just seemed sort of broken, like some sort of miscommunication. Hendon decides to, tuck it and run, gets minimal. And then the first real thing that Pitt does well that is like a contributing factor to these plays, because up until this point it was just Tennessee mistakes. This play they bring pressure, good for them, and they get to Hendon. He has to tuck and run. But Jabari Small just falls down in the backfield and completely takes himself out of the play. Maybe Hendon's able to roll out, look at somebody downfield, so forth and so on, but I digress. We end up punting again. So the thing for me is why the mistakes, right? So there could be some contributing factors here. I mean, one is obvious. First road game of the year, right? And it's a pretty hostile environment. I don't think Pitt's going to win any, loudest crowd awards or any shit like that. But, pretty hostile. And the team is new, right? There's a lot of similar faces. But this group of guys, it's the first time they've played together. They've had 9 days to think about it, right? But the other part of this is maybe more scary in that the coaches understand that we cannot run the ball, right? So a lot more pressure is going to be put on Hendon Hooker's arm and his legs for that matter, which is something I never really appreciate. When you start playing 11-on-1 instead of 11-on-11, things go bad. And although Hendon Hooker is a really good quarterback, I think he's hit his limit. I thought he hit his limit last year, his maximal, optimal limit of being a playmaker. I think we've seen that, right? You're going to need 10 other guys to contribute if this offense is going to work correctly. And early on, if you're just relying on Hendon Hooker's arm, this spells disaster. So you have to find running somewhere, whether it be some more uniquely designed plays for Hendon Hooker, maybe get a receiver involved. I saw they tried to, give Jalen Hyatt like an end around thing, which is a neat wrinkle. Maybe Squirrel White is the better option for that sort of play. Dare I say even bring Joe Milton in on occasion to play a sort of a Tim Tebow role to really mix up the variation. Probably not going to happen. But it seemed like we were more concerned with individual matchups in this game and this game plan than, variable things to keep the offense off balance. Still great usage of space, things like that. But it is a bit concerning. And the mistakes could be, again, part of this weird expectation that, why are we not running the ball now? This isn't the rhythm we're used to, all these passes and whatnot. I mean, just think about if you're in your job. You're sitting there typing, your reports, or you're, working on a car, changing oil, whatever the hell it is that you do. I don't know. If you're not doing what you normally do, it's going to kind of throw you off a little bit. And maybe there was a little more responsibility than expected from some of these guys. So, but yeah, even on the third drive, We get down the field pretty good, convert a good 3rd and 4. Then there's this ghost holding penalty where I thought Sproggins sort of let up on the guy. The refs in this were idiotic to me. Then an incomplete pass to Warren. Jalen Wright runs that great play for 14 yards and then runs again for 2. And then that was it. It's like, but yeah, the lack of a running back is just unfortunate. Oftentimes it's sort of hard to share the blame. Like, okay, maybe it's the offensive line that's not really, doing too much, or maybe there are holes there, but the running back just can't get through them. There are vision problems on this. Like Jalen Wright, not bad, I will say, but I mean a senior running back like Jabari Small, you would expect, something. He's supposed to be healthy now. There was talk about him gaining 12 pounds in the off season or something like that. Like, okay, well, then make one cut and go. Please run past the defensive lineman. That's not to negate any good plays that Pitt made. I mean, they are pretty good up front, but averaging 2 yards a carry, you just cannot do that in a game. It's going to lead you nowhere. It's going to be a really interesting coaching challenge, sort of finding ways to run. But, I will say, perhaps somebody develops later. I think Sampson was a great option in Ball State. I know he didn't, he's more of a slasher type of back, but it'd be interesting to see moving forward. And we could talk about the abysmal third quarter. I mean, you've got this team pretty much right where you want them, and it was almost like our offense couldn't believe they were winning or something. It's like they were just waiting for the opposing offense to score so then they could be like, okay, now we really need to get going. It's like, no, just go. Like, what's going on? But yeah, punt, gets a punt blocked, fumble, and then like a field goal. Like that's terrible. 3 points in regulation in the second half. Just awful. But again, Pitt, higher ranked team, on the road, still come away with a victory. Like, hard to really complain about that. And, the good thing is you could go in this game, let's say they do step on their throats, and, Tennessee wins by 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns, whatever maybe it should have been, assuming you have a competent offensive performance in the second half. Then you go back and you say, well, we didn't really have much to work on, right? Now you come out of this game thinking, okay, there's plenty to work on. You know what I mean? There's a lot of execution things that we can do. You don't come out of this game feeling like you're hot shit, especially you're about to go into another game where, you should dominate thoroughly. So I would say it's setting up really well to go and play Florida and then LSU after the fact. But still, plenty to work on the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, I thought it was a really good performance from the defense. I would like to go ahead and get this. I will say that this defensive performance goes a long way to sort of eliminate the trope of, the defense was gassed. That was the problem. The offense just didn't do anything, and then the defense was gassed. And it's like, okay, well, why didn't they gas this time? Because in the whole entirety of the second half, there's plenty of opportunities for the defense to go, you know what, I'm gassed. The first 3 drives of the second quarter were 11 plays, and that includes like big special teams play like the block. And by the way, a blocked punt, that is always just an emotional sort of play. It shouldn't even, physically, it shouldn't even be possible to block a punt or block a field goal. Those are just plays in which you're just catching the other team lacking. There's no doubt about it. Like, special teams big plays are because the opposing team, or the victim of the play, I guess, I don't know how it is, but they're just shook. It's clearly emotional. And at that point in the game, when you see a blocked punt, it's like, okay, now the momentum is transferred. But, so for all the times that the defense could have gassed, they just, I guess, choose not to. And it's like, yeah, defenses, look, These are 20-year-olds, right? These are like athletic, prime 20-year-old men who average anywhere between like 5'10" and 6'6" tall. They're not getting gassed. They get a short rest in between plays. They run maybe 10 yards. No one's getting gassed. I'm going to let you in a little secret. Defenses just quit. They don't gas. They quit. When the offense isn't producing, they start to see the writing on the wall. That's really what it's all about. So one guy takes a play off, then another guy takes a play off, then before you know it, like 4 guys are taking a play off at the same time. It results in this big play and then a snowball effect. That's all there is to it. No one's getting tired on the field. If they are, they get subbed out, take a breather, and then come back into play. No one's getting gassed. It's just quit. It's really all there is to it. But either way, I thought the defense played a really good game. There's definitely a bend, don't break aspect of this. And I saw some chatter online where, like, you know, a couple people were like, well, if their starting quarterback were in the game, like, it would be good. I don't think that's the case. I don't think if their starting quarterback were still in the game that they're in any better position. I actually think that, and this will sound like primetime copium or whatever, but I actually think that by their starting quarterback getting out, Pitt relied more on the run and thus had a more varied attack. Their backup quarterback is definitely not as good as their starting quarterback in terms of throwing, but I equate it to sort of like the Carson Wentz, Nick Foles situation. The Eagles knew that Nick Foles was not a better quarterback, talent-wise, than Carson Wentz. But Nick Foles did something that Carson Wentz did not, and I'm not just talking about winning a Super Bowl against Tom Brady, head-to-head. What I mean is he enabled the other 10 guys to have a role, right? It helped to make the coaching staff a little more prepared for coaching a team as opposed to saying, okay, Carson, go out and just, throw the ball real well. And that's what happens a lot of times. Like, that's another version of 11-on-1 where you just rely on the quarterback's arm. Oh, this guy can throw it in these tight windows. No big deal. It's like, well, why don't you just run like a good play? You know what I mean? So, yeah, definitely the backup was not as talented or anything like that. But it allowed, Pitt to sort of use all available options, all hands on deck. And, when you're varied in offense, but you're consistent, it makes it really difficult on defenses. And I thought we handled it, pretty well. Again, a lot of bend, don't break. Warren Burrell is a liability. I saw some people talking online about how, the throw that the Pitt quarterback made, to tie the game was just like fantastic. It's like, yeah, it was, but Warren Burrell is lost in coverage. You line up on the inside because as a defensive back, one of the first things you're taught, don't let anything to the inside. They teach you that in high school football. Don't let anything to the inside, right? That's why slants are such a great play. Hard to defend for sure. Shade to the inside. You'll allow some outside stuff. Don't let anything to the inside. So Warren Burrell lines up to the inside. The guy he's covering makes a move to the outside. He completely bites on it. And the guy goes back to the inside to make a pretty good catch. And Warren Burrell is just hanging all over him. And like, he should not be in the field in that capacity. I think he is more suited maybe to be a nickel or a star guy. Because he is pretty athletic, but he's a little stiff, and I think that gets him in a lot of trouble. He's caught flat-footed more often than not. I thought Haddon had a great game. He did get a couple by him, but I thought he looked fantastic. Other than getting hurdled, I thought Trayvon Flowers stepped up and made some really big plays. Beasley, I thought, was a fantastic linebacker. Jeremy Banks sort of lost in coverage sometimes. But you kind of know what you're going to get from him. But Beasley and Banks, I thought, are solid. These guys really know their assignments. I think they're well coached. But yeah, it takes them a while to get sort of ramped up. I think against a a sort of a quick strike offense, these guys might get exposed a little bit, but there's not really any of those types of teams, throughout. I think they're a solid unit, overall. All right, now time for some extracurriculars. So, to me, the Pittsburgh fans looked incredibly unhealthy, right? I know there's a connection between beauty and health, so it might sound like I'm saying they're ugly, which they sort of were, but they look more just unhealthy. Like, there may be something in the water over there. I know it's the Steel City or something like that. Like normally, and there'll be some pervert cameraman, and he'll look and go, okay, let's find like the hottest chicks we can, the hottest college co-eds and whatnot. There were none to be found. they were all gross. And I don't know if it was like this diversity and inclusion initiative just to get every Tom, Dick, and Harry in the picture, but I mean even the co-eds were gross. It could have just been the colors too. I don't know what it's like, a cerulean blue that they have on. It's just not really flattering at all. I thought the commentary was night and day compared to the Ball State game. Like, if you listen to the Vol Pod #1, which nobody did, that's fine. No one will listen to this either, but that's what you got to keep doing. You got to keep cranking out the content, right? But yeah, the commentary, night and day, light years ahead of whatever ESPN was doling out. So it's good to be on ABC sometimes. I feel like we hadn't been on ABC in quite some time. Maybe we were on ABC last year for the Pitt game. I don't know if I even watched that game all the way through. But, yeah, I thought Pat Narduzzi seems like a complete cocksucker. That call where, who got the touchdown? Was it Brew McCoy? So Brew McCoy is getting shoved out of bounds. And I'll agree with Pat in that I don't know if it was like an intentional shove and push. But, this idea, I think the explanation that Pat Narduzzi gave, for challenging that call was like, well, these guys, they'll cut themselves off and whatnot. That didn't happen. Like, is everybody on Pitt's sidelines like too much of a pussy to go, look, his hands were on him. Don't do this. It's clearly like you're not going to win that play. You're not going to win this battle. But yeah, just looks like a cocksucker. And it's a shame because I know the legend of Narduzzi at Michigan State, incredible defensive coordinator, and definitely knows ball or whatever. But it is so important to have like at least an engaging personality as a head coach. Instead, you get somebody like this, and it's like this is what you want fans to rally around. This is what they're buying tickets for. This guy with transition lenses and just this constant smirk on his face. Either way, really glad to have beaten him. Just seems like a complete douche, and I'm sure he's a great guy with a great family or whatever, but I only comment on what I see. So, but yeah, I think that's it for today. You can catch me on YouTube at the Volpod channel and my Substack, volpod.substack.com. Other than that, have a great day and go Vols.